Well, it's an honor to be doing this with you, Susana.
Likewise, it's going to be a phenomenal discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah, so welcome to this session all along the Watchtower, and I really love the Bob Dylan theme in all these sessions. Scouting for novel approaches to refractive and presbyopia correction. Needless to say, this is really deep into our hearts to be talking about that, and with a visionary panel. So we'll be talking about what tools do we have right now, but mostly what technologies will come in the future. With us today, we have Dimitri Azar. I shared time in Scapens for several years when you were at Harvard. We have Ben Bergo with Tenpoint Therapeutics. We have Keith Holliday, former CTO of STAAR. We have Terry Kim, Chief Medical Officer with Alcon, and Chris Morrill with Medevise Consulting.
And we want to thank the Eyecelerator, Arvo, for having us be a part of this program. I practice refractive surgery in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and since it is what I do, and I absolutely love it, I'm rather bullish on it. But there's some, ups and downs that we're experiencing, and we got this bright, exciting future. And it's, one of the biggest needs in eye care, the treatment of uncorrected refractive error. And we're not going to spend a lot of time talking about glasses and contact lenses. We see that as great markets, important markets. We're going to be talking more about the surgical and the pharmacological aspects of refractive surgery correction. And, but in the beginning, we're going to start out with some hardware.
Yeah, and this is close to my wheelhouse. I am a professor of optics and ophthalmology at the University of Rochester. So we are at the stage where we develop technologies that eventually go into the market, into the hands of clinicians. So we would like to start addressing some innovations that are actually now making headlines, not necessarily for ophthalmology, but in other fields like AI, virtual reality, microelectronics chips. The first questions, I think we probably go to Dimitri, who have been working a lot in these areas. And I guess the first question is VR. So we have virtual reality, we have headsets. These are devices that couple with the eye, so they're probably well set for applications in ophthalmology. So what can you tell us about these devices as tools for the clinical practice?
Well, thank you again for including me here in this austere panel. Thanks to give some opinions about this. The VR sets have been employed frequently, and we've seen at many meetings, especially 2-3 years ago, a peak of exhibitors trying to show their VR sets applied not only in the front of the eye, but potentially for the back of the eye. And probably I would think there were maybe 3 major applications. As we all know, the lowest hanging fruit was visual field testing, instead of putting the patient in a device where they have, we don't want to give names of companies that are making them, but the headset can give equivalent results to the standard visual field tests. The second and more probably interesting application, and to date I don't think we've reached that, is to improve patient flow in the clinic. So rather than having several technicians with you working in the clinic, one technician can supervise many patients. The way I used to explain it to the engineers working with me, it's like when you're leaving your supermarket, you can go and yourself check out, so you could have your own exam and there's a technician observing you, more like an airline when you check in and then you find yourself on the plane with practically nobody helping you. Hopefully you get to the right plane. But that's the idea. And that, I think, is still a struggle. I haven't seen and many people have evaluated these technologies, how they can improve patient flow. In my experience, they've been delaying patient flow, but it's an interesting beginning to look at. And the third application, which we've worked with University of Washington on this, is to try to have, for example, there's a referral from an emergency room, from endocrinology, from neurosurgery. If they have these units in the clinics, they can get a lot of data, and so the ophthalmology referral will be streamlined and then can be sent to the appropriate, let's call it appropriate referral service, rather than having to send a resident to go look. And that's easy in academic institutions, but in private practice, it can easily make things a bit easier.
Yeah, and there's two things that you mentioned on workflow and also, trying to improve probably the patient experience. And in the field of refractive and probably presbyopia corrections, we have an enormous number of technologies. There can be cornea, it can be lens, there can be many different types of intraocular lens principles. So there is probably a good value on the simulations, right? It's like making the subjects experience the world that they're going to be seeing with the new devices. And there's VRs, but there's also visual simulators that are more augmented reality.
Contrast sensitivity testing, pupils, color vision, all the things a refractive surgeon may miss will be picked up, plus simulations, and then informed consent. You tell the patient about everything you want to do. They're sitting captive, and makes the experience a little bit better.
We found great luck with the simulation part for patient education. Because a lot of the times in these presbyopia options especially, we're painting these word pictures. Yeah. And it's so neat to be able to show them with the simulators. So two of the uses you talk about, we're already using in our practice. We're helping with some of the visual field testing. Some of them are in clinical trials right now and going quite well, I may add. And then also patient education, worth their weight in gold.
Yeah, I think the other area is surgical teaching. I'm still continuing my surgical cataract practice in an academic center, Duke in specific, and it's always a struggle to teach residents and fellows how to do these cases. So Alcon's entered into this field. We have Fidelis, which is our VR surgical simulator tool. It has a VR headset, has 2 haptics and a foot pedal that's integrated to the phaco instrumentation. So you can really see, feel, and touch what it's like to do cataract surgery. It tracks your performance, gives you real-time feedback to improve outcomes. So I think this could be also a very powerful tool of VR can take a place in terms of teaching.
Yeah, and Dimitri, Terry, you touched upon, clinical data and tons of data that leads, I think, very well into AI, right? What can you tell about the applications of AI in ophthalmology, but in particular in the field of refractive and presbyopia?
I think AI is going to obviously play a big role in a lot of fields, specifically in ophthalmology, specifically with disease screening and disease detection, but specifically with refractive surgery, Susana, as you alluded to, it's already had an impact. So, for instance, we do a phakic IOL procedure in patients who don't qualify for LASIK. These are typically very high myopic individuals, and we place this contact lens device into the eye to correct the refractive error. But we have issues in terms of sizing and vaulting of these lenses. So Roger and Roberto Valdivar have their ICL Guru program, which is an AI-powered nomogram that actually looks at a lot of UBM images, not only images but videos, to help with ICL sizing and to help predict the vault. So it's not only image analytics, it's predictive analytics. And I think this is where the biggest impact AI is going to make in refractive surgery.
Mm-hmm. Keith?
IOL power calculations also. They're
Yep.
now all the programs.
Yeah, and I think the combination of having great technology, like OCT now, it can provide 3-dimensional models at the patient level. Combine that with the immense number of data that we have, like the combination of quantitative imaging with AI, I think is very powerful. And you mentioned the IO power calculation, selection of intraocular lenses based on both.
One of the things and I believe me, the rest of the panel, we're going to get to you, but Dimitri, you're doing some really interesting things in miniaturization and microelectronics. And, you know, space in our offices is just getting to be such prime real estate. And can you tell us what's going on in that arena and how that's going to help us?
Well, I can tell you this is, you have to have a very, long-term outlook here. The company that I was leading before was a joint venture between two big organizations, and it was sorts of an incubator. We had about 13 projects, all focusing on miniaturization, because the future is about small devices and big data, and it ties in with the AI. That's where the future is. But from my experience, after 5 years working on that, we generated several hundred patents, but no product. Because the idea was, our plan was to try to explore what is the future and not necessarily come up with the devices, because the focus of both companies was predominantly trying to identify these applications. You can see applications, of course, in sensors in the eye, especially for glaucoma, some retinal sensors, sensors for dry eye, and again, tying that in a closed loop with potential therapeutics. In refractive surgery, there are many procedures that are now done with big, huge devices. You can imagine in the future, if the funding is available and so on, to miniaturize these to a level that is extremely manageable and not requiring a big, huge operating room to be filled with equipment. So there are many potential applications. Unfortunately, I can't think of an example today where this miniaturization is in the clinic. But that's, I think, the future.
You know, I think it's in reality now. I mean, if you look at what WHO estimates, over 2 billion people who have vision impairment, over 50% of those patients, it could be prevented if we diagnose it earlier, right? Yeah. So if you look at this small organ, the eye, we have such big equipment that's required to image it. And we're doing so many diagnostic tests. So Alcon's actually co-sponsoring a eye pitch session tomorrow. And there's a Japanese doctor, Dr. Shimizu, who has this smart eye camera that he's presenting. And it's actually, if you look at it, pretty simple. He's got a slit lamp, a ophthalmoscope direct, fundus camera, and a topography unit that's mounted onto an iPhone that you use to just, and so, you know, cost and accessibility are major issues in terms of getting eye care out there. So we're already seeing folks like this, you know, bringing these products.
Absolutely huge.
Can I just add to this, is that in all of these applications, what we've learned is that it's not just miniaturization of the hardware, which is a necessity. The iPhone does it all the time, but also incorporating some software mechanisms that can take blurry images, but getting so many of them that there's enough overlap that you can come up with a clear image, even though every image in and of itself is not necessarily good. And that allows for the possibilities of miniaturization and attachments to cell phones, where most of the hardware is sitting in that cell phone.
So, I mean, all these technologies we're talking about actually start in an R&D phase, in some cases, in many cases, in university laboratories. So I guess my next question is, how can basic science and the clinic and industry better collaborate to respond first to fundamental questions? And I think there's many fundamental questions open in the refractive and presbyopia. In the previous session, we were talking about myopia. I mean, even the mechanisms of myopia development and how myopia slows down, they're not clear. I mean, again, in accommodation. So how do you invite these collaborations between the different stakeholders, primarily coming from basic science, and how can be done, or what can be done to be more relevant to guide the day-to-day practice and future paradigms? I would like probably start first with Chris, because you have this view from Europe, from the US. You collaborate with like individuals at different stages in development. So what do you see from your experience that can drive technologies further from these collaborations, multidisciplinary collaborations?
Well, in Europe today, we have, there's typical public universities, private, as you know. There's a lot of research funding that comes from the European government that many startups will use to take advantage of getting going. The two biggest projects that I'm aware of right now are near Lyon with Carinova, and they're working to bring a fully robotic femtosecond laser to the market. And then there's Schwind in Germany with their lyric procedure. And in both cases, they've partnered with a university. In the case of Carinova, it's Saint-Étienne, and with Schwind, it's Bochum University, Professor Burkhard Dick and his head of experimental ophthalmology, Stephanie Joaquin. And so it's a very collaborative process. And with the lyric project, they still really don't know what the outcome is going to be. But if you look at the history of femtosecond laser and trying to impact presbyopia in the lens, a lot of that work has come out of northern Germany. For whatever reason, there's been a lot of femtosecond lasers that have been developed. And so you see in Europe hotbeds for technology. You have Murcia with Pablo Artel and the work that he's done, and now he has his IOL. But before that, he developed an adaptive optic diagnostic system and then commercialized it. So what we see, I think, in Europe is a lot more of a collaboration between universities and smaller private companies, because they know that the R&D of a small company is not going to be able to necessarily fund the whole thing. And so working with the university and government grants helps to get that over the line.
Yeah, Keith, your perspective.
Well, going right back to the beginning of the meeting, obviously in the US at the moment, there's a lot of uncertainty about university funding. So this actually might be the perfect time for universities and industry to collaborate more thoroughly. I've got to word this carefully, but often university research can be a little bit more financially feasible. Buying some equipment, maybe funding a PhD, something like that. I mean, it does seem like now might be the time to really push these programs forwards. Often inside a company, you're pushing product, and R&D may say, oh, but wouldn't it be interesting if we could understand what's really going on? And it is interesting, but it's not always, the financial route to success. And so being able to parlay some of that off to universities, obviously understanding does lead to further applications and possible products in the future. So, I think it's something, the time is right for these programs to get going.
I agree.
I think the other beautiful thing with the collaboration is the beautiful dance between industry and practice, whether it's academic or non-academic, but also the whole purpose of these meetings. Going to ARVO, going to the Academy, ESCRS, ASCRS. I mean, to me, this is where a lot of that collaboration happens, and that's what's beautiful about this meeting. I'm going to dive into our next topic, Susana, and this is on we're going to go into presbyopia for a little while here. And Ben, I'm going to start with you. We have, these, surgical corrections of presbyopia. Yeah, there's the corneal correction of presbyopia, which to me, I'm always a little frustrated by because we're not getting at the issue, the lens, but it can work quite well, especially monovision being the most common way we surgically correct presbyopia still. We got allogenic inlays coming down the pike. We are working in sclera with laser, microperforations. We have, a lot of neat things, that are happening. And then we got, wonderful lens replacement options that, are growing at a neat pace, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. And we have drops. And so you're going to have the first shot today at drops. I know you're very interested in this topic. and very involved in this topic, but we've seen it, not, quite, kind of failure to launch, let's say. And so what do you think it's going to take? Do you think we can get to where, because as a physician, you always want to start with the least invasive thing first. That's why I tell patients, you like glasses, wear them. You like contacts, wear them. But now presbyopia, we should be starting with a drop. What's it going to take?
Yeah, thanks, Vance. I am a drop believer. I do believe that there are a number of products now, obviously 2 on market, 2 in later stage development, and I believe both physicians and patients will have quite a range of options fairly shortly. If we just maybe hark back a little bit and think about the product that launched first, about Vuity and what happened there a little and what we've learned from that. Ultimately, if we look back and we think about how that launched, I think there was some mismatch in expectations around the product, and physicians learning very quickly in real time what the right patient profile would be. Right? Am I trying to screen in patients here by age? Is lifestyle a factor? Right? Is your starting visual acuity where you are a factor for whether these drops are going to work or not? And at the same time, obviously, patients were coming into the clinic asking for this drop that would get them out of their reading glasses, and with that, again, there was a mismatch, and that struggled early on. I think what we've learned from that is that having a preservative-free formulation is going to be important. It's beneficial for those with maybe some ocular surface disease, perhaps. I think also what we've learned is that lifestyle is important. How you're going to use the drop, what's going to work for you. Some people want a longer-acting formulation that is on for you during the busy part of your day. Others may seek a product that is on for a shorter period of time. So when you ask what's it going to take, I think ultimately it's going to take from both ODs and MDs a good understanding of the profile of the product, so they can understand and learn again how to screen in the best patients so they get into a cycle of success, and for patients to work out how they want to use the drop, how often they want to use it, and to go through that trial period. And I think that sets up both the patient and the physician with some success.
Yeah. Terry.
No, I was just going to piggyback on that. I mean, I think we learned a lot of lessons from Vuity's launch, and I think a big impact is going to be side effect profile. So we're going to have to make sure that there aren't any untoward effects to the eye, such as retinal tear detachments. So it'll be interesting to see. Excited to have Oasis's product out, 0.4% Pilo, see how that works. I think efficacy obviously is going to be a big impact too, and also comfort. Patients want something, this is going to be a lifestyle drug, so they want something that's going to work, but it also is going to be comfortable. I'm excited about Lens Therapeutics product, different molecule, so may have a little different mode of action with not as much strain on the ciliary muscle. So those are all factors to consider, but in light of your comment, Vance, I think it is a track to have something like this that the patient can control when they're going to use it, and hopefully with this meiotic therapy, you can get enough efficacy, and you can just not use it if you don't want it and not worry about any permanent effects of a surgical procedure.
Having been involved now in 135 clinical trials, I find it interesting when patients are excited about it in the trial, and then, it's not the same once it, gets to market. And so in the trial, one of the, patients love the F word, free, And so, when you're getting into practice, though, and they have to pay for it, I'm trying to figure out, is it the doctors that we need to train more in presbyopia drops, or is it the patients? Because I just want to see patients getting a little bit more excited about it, and it will raise to top of mind awareness for me, because I literally want to make my patients happy. And I think one of the things that I wanted to ask you, Susana, is also about our clinical trials. Right now, we're still using, how many letters improvement on ETDRS to get something like this FDA approved. We don't really use any, objective measures of accommodation or depth of focus. Do you see with all your beautiful work in optics something that that will come down the pike that's going to give us, I know you can give us some measurements, but we got to validate those measurements and be able to use them.
Yeah, so I mean, if we're seeking drops, it's not the case with the meiotic drops, but eventually drops that restore dynamic accommodation. We want to test whether dynamic accommodation has been restored, right? It's not only about, you know, your range of focus that could be given by accommodation or pseudo accommodation. It's really understand the mechanism of action of the drug and understand and validate whether the crystalline lens is truly reshaping, for example. So I think outcomes or endpoints that refer directly to the mechanism of action are needed, and we have the technologies to do that. I mean, we have OCT, we can quantify the lens, we can look at aberrometry measurements of accommodation. So all those, I think, are tools that need to be incorporated in the trials to see if accommodation is truly being restored. But even endpoints that are visual acuity or near, I think they're limited. I mean, they're really not assessing how the patient functions and navigate in the real world. So I think, and those can be subjective, but tools that allows us to mimic the real world situation in terms of light levels, in terms of, it's probably going to be multidimensional and more complex than just a high contrast, you know, optotype. I don't think that really, and we have actually literature on that. They do not report what the patient is actually linking to happiness, right?
Susana, what % of the effect of meiotics is coming from the pupillary constriction versus restoration of dynamic accommodation in your mind?
Ben?
Yeah. So I think the only objective measure in these studies is meiosis, right? So if you're measuring, you know, the change from baseline in pupil size, and you're looking at how that trends through the day, obviously, you know, you get a peak earlier in the day, and then, you know, the pupil sort of, you know, skates off, you know, into the latter hours. That objectively shows you how you're bringing the pupil down and creating that pinhole effect, that pinhole optics is the mechanism. That is it. Visual acuity, and we are measuring, so 15 letters in ear without a one-line loss of distance is the endpoint. But we know that is subjective, and so, you know, again, pupil is the only real true measure of, you know, the pharmacologic effect of these agents. Back to the other point on other endpoints, you know, I do think that, you know, functional endpoints are going to be important, you know, for people in the real world. You know, what can patients really grab onto? You know, in our second pivotal study in Brio 2, we measured reading speed and assessed reading speed, and we saw almost a 40% increase in reading speed. That's something that, you know, people can relate to, and they're going to really enjoy that kind of benefit once they're using the drop.
I think the other aspect that's overlooked with these presbyopia eye drops are the therapeutic applications of this. Any eye doctor will tell you, you know, you have these problem patients from RK or decentered LASIK ablation or SCAR, and you put that pinhole, and they're like, oh, that's what I want. I want that vision right there. So I think there are a lot of aspects that we could use this for folks who've already had previous procedures to help them therapeutically, and also to complement, you know, there could be patients who have, let's say, a EDOF or monofocal plus, and they're not getting the near they have. It can also be complementary to some of the, you know, presbyopia surgical procedures that we're doing.
But you have to leverage that also with luminance, right? I mean,
Sure.
You shrink the pupil, you have a lower luminance, and we know that contrast sensitivity lowers when you have. So there's many factors that play into not only the optics, but also the psychophysical functions.
Let's dive a little bit into surgery now. And each one of these topics, we could spend 45 minutes with you all on. But as far as surgery, you know, we have corneal refractive, we have great implants, and I know in our practice, you know, they're now 40% of the implants we do are these advanced implants. And how big is the need to be continuing to look for, you know, future technologies for the presbyopic, you know, patient population, and how do we prioritize that? I know, you know, Terry, you're out there looking for things, and how do we, you know, how important is that need, and how do you prioritize it?
Yeah, I mean, it's still very important. Look, our satisfaction rates with LASIK are extremely high, highest of any surgical procedure, right, out there. but we still see room for improvement. Also, it doesn't usually address presbyopia. You mentioned monovision, which is a workaround, but doesn't really address full range of vision. So I think this is, earlier you saw some of the slides of what's happening with refractive surgery trends, but you're still seeing presbyopia IOL curves doing pretty well. So I think patients are looking for that full range of vision, which explains maybe some of the trends that we're seeing. But I still think there's a lot of unmet needs there, and we still have a lot of work to do to try to find the best technology for our patients.
Great. Other panelists, comments on that?
Yeah, one comment is that I mean, this is common experience, but the advances that we've been having in all these procedures, whether it's cataract or refractive, to get somebody happy with any presbyopic correction, you need that distance eye to be exactly on target. And the progress there has been proceeding, because if you have a blurry eye in one eye and trying to do monovision or some multifocal effect, the patient is going to be unhappy. Having one great eye for distance, whether it's through monofocal or multifocal lens, becomes a prerequisite. And a lot of the advances are helping patients getting that crisp 20/20 vision for distance. And that allows a lot of space for you to have a non-accommodating lens in the other eye. And the progress on the true accommodation is going to be the holy grail, I think.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So with these advanced implants, I think one thing that comes into place, there's many choices. I mean, even which eye you correct for far, which eye you correct for near in monovision. So patient education and running the patient through the experience is something that appears to be key, right? Particularly when there's so many options. So we'd like to discuss, and it's open to any panelists, is how to incorporate this patient education, and not only at the moment or just prior to surgery, but actually like a full journey, probably when the patient starts to be presbyopic, not reaching cataract. So patient education, the role of simulating technologies for pick up the lens that really meets the needs of the patient. Keith, do you want to jump in?
Sure. It's obviously difficult. One thing that I think is just a kind of a quick anecdote. When I talk to friends who've tried presbyopia-correcting contact lenses, very frequently they say, oh, well, I tried Model X. I couldn't see a thing. It was terrible. Then I tried Model Y. Yeah, it was okay. And then the optometrist said, well, maybe try Model Z. And now I wear them every day. I love them. And it's with a contact lens, you take it out, you throw it away. With surgery, you've got it. And of course, some of it is reversible, but you don't want to be going in with the intention of, well, never mind if it doesn't work. So, it's extremely important that the patient really knows what they're getting, but it's not that easy to provide it. And obviously, with your company and its products, it's a great step in the right direction. I actually think that contact lens trials are actually quite helpful if you can somehow replicate the visual pathway that you may be going to get. I do have, from my career, a couple of examples of success where we've picked a contact lens that's commercially available and said, try this. If you like this, you'll like the surgery. And one of the problems is they try the contact lens and they go, I love it. I don't need surgery. I've got these contact lenses now. So, that is one way of doing it, but I think with the high-tech virtual reality and so on, the advantage of the contact lens is you can do it 24/7. Well, maybe not when you're asleep, but you can live your normal life. So I do think even though that's not a high-tech method, it can be quite helpful.
I'm a believer in the contact lens method too, but I think the public has also spoken. It's that presbyopia age group is when so many people drop out of contact lenses. And so when I do a trial, I say, if you try it, if you like it, and you like the contact, keep doing that. If you like the vision, but not the contact, then we can talk about surgery. It's just contact lens dropout is still huge, and I think a lot of it has to do with, because when we do a multifocal implant, we want a really clean optical system. When you do a multifocal contact, oftentimes that lens isn't clean. You know, I say the best extended depth of focus lens out there is our own early cataract. That thing that's reducing low light image quality is helping bright light reading. So that when you add a multifocal contact lens to that, it degrades image quality. And I think that's why, you know, we see this drop off. That's why we need contacts that are gonna, you know, maybe have better image quality at a distance and better, you know, up close. And there's neat research happening in that arena. But I think one of the things I want to talk about is this.
Vance,
idea.
can I make a comment on that?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So a few years ago, we did the clinical trial for the Vivior behavior monitor, which was, I don't think it ever really caught on outside of Europe, but it was a device that had 8 different objective measurements, including distance to target, gaze, head tilt, ambient light, all these things. And it created a defocus curve that was an objective defocus curve. When we did the clinical trial, we were monitoring one of the sites, and it showed that every single patient that this surgeon did a multifocal contact lens trial opted not to convert to a premium IOL, whereas every single patient that wore the monitor converted, or just about every single patient, because they had more of a sense about what their vision was going to be like, because the monitor could see how much time they were spending at distance, at near, at intermediate. And so it was a much more interesting way of objectively quantifying the measurements versus a contact lens trial, which is kind of more fleeting in a way.
Well, and like I said, putting a multifocal contact on a multifocal lens and then saying, do you want that for your implant? You know, they don't want that image quality because I don't think it's a real simulation.
It's not true simulation.
Right.
I'm curious to know, Susana, what the penetration has been with your device, the IVIS Gecko, and is it making an impact? Because I do think it's helpful when you give that option to your patients to actually see what it's like to have a multifocal nor EDOF, to do, you know, bilateral or do, you know, premium bilateral summation. It's
Absolutely. And what we're saying is not only the patients, you know, feeling more comfortable about their choice, but particularly the surgeons. And I think that leads to some comments from Vance, right? Is you know, you want to convince the hesitant patient, but mostly the conservative surgeon that is not offering these technologies just because they don't know how the patients are going to like them. So really, really helpful in increasing the penetration of
One of the things that I would love the panel's opinion on, and any of you, is, you know, when one of the top 3 reasons for falls in our country is looking through bifocals, going downstairs, or over uneven surfaces in elderly people. And we're removing cataracts at a younger and younger age. We're identifying the lens as the problem sooner. People are having lens replacement just for presbyopia, one of the fastest growing areas in our practice. And so when a surgeon is educating a patient about their lens options and trying to nudge them towards a monofocal implant, I think the patient needs to understand what absolute presbyopia means, having the reading range of an 80-year-old for the rest of your life. You may have the dexterity at 65 to navigate that, but when you're 80 and you have a higher chance of falls, should we be telling patients more about what it's like to be 80 with bifocals, or does that sound too aggressive?
Well, it's something you can do, right? You give them some drops and you knock out their accommodation for a while and see what it feels like. You can do a perfect simulation of that if you wanted to. I mean, it's. I think if somebody had asked me if I would like to try it, I think I would have declined. But sure, I mean, why not?
Yeah.
If you look at the data of hip fractures prior to cataract surgery, it's enormous, the risk-benefit ratio. So if you explain that to a patient, I would think that they would be in favor, because we all know that the tendency is when they fall and there's a fractured hip, that there is a decline in overall health.
Right.
I think this brings us to truly accommodating intraocular lenses where these issues will all be resolved, I think.
Yeah, I think you're dead
Especially
on right.
when we reach
Susan,
age 80.
accommodating lenses?
accommodating lenses, yeah, and as we actually move into the future, right? I don't think there is any accommodating lens that we can say that is a truly accommodating lens. So for the panel, where do you see the future of intraocular lenses from what's coming up, from what the limitations so far have been, and how the field is moving forward. Keith.
Yeah, successful accommodating IOLs I put in the same category as energy-efficient nuclear fusion. It's always 10 years away. And I mean, hopefully that's wrong. Hopefully now it really is just a few years ago away. I think there's some fantastic new options that are coming out there. And, I personally believe one or more of them will be successful. And obviously that really truly is the holy grail of cataract and refractive surgery. Mm-hmm. You can imagine a future where, we talked about myopia control this morning, and when you do start to be able to control myopia, you stop the lengthening of the eye, you're putting less strain on the retina, and you start being able to do clear lens extraction at earlier ages. And if you've got something that really truly provides real accommodation, it's just going to be absolutely massive. I mean, just to roll a few examples off, there's the jealousy lens, the adaptive lens, the ACO lens is one that's out of the Netherlands, which goes in the sulcus. And I think, just to name 3 straight off the top of my head, I think they're all potentially successful lenses. And there's a few that, that have been around for a while, which we just don't hear about very much anymore. And whether or not they are continuing at the same rate, the Power Vision lens from Alcon is one, which I know is still being worked on, and maybe that's going to burst on the scene sometime soon. But it will be completely ground-changing for cataract and refractive surgery.
2 comments. One, I have 4 accommodating lens companies waiting to start a trial, waiting for funding. I sometimes wonder why industry isn't maybe investing in some of them, just maybe a little bit more robustly. But one of the questions I have for you, Susana, is we see purely multifocal lenses giving full range vision. We have this dream of purely accommodating lenses, bringing full range vision. But our natural lens isn't purely accommodating, and it's not purely multifocal. And so why are we not developing an accommodating lens that has a multifocal component to it that is more like our natural lens?
Yeah, well, our natural lens is a moving target, right? It's a beautiful gradient index structure that, reshapes when you're young, and then over time, it loses accommodation, and it also increases aberration. So in that sense, it becomes multifocal or extended depth of focus because it actually, gets more spherical aberration. So I would try to restore the young crystalline lens. There's, questions about the capture bag, how you capture the forces, but the more we mimic the young crystalline lens, which is more like a truly accommodating lens, I think the better. Although for the aging crystalline lens, there are some features like the meiosis and the increase of spherical aberration that helps the patients to gain full range of focus. But if I was to choose, I would go to the young crystalline lens, which is
Can I add something about the accommodating lens? I've been helping Jim Ellis since he started Jealousy, and I'm on his board. And the data that he's shown, really, that data, they're very, very encouraging. So I'm sure not only this lens, but other lenses, there's going to be many lenses coming on the market that follow a similar principle. And they will probably be able to provide more than a young patient's range of accommodation. But again, the trials need to be done, and more rigorous data needs to be generated. But the early indicators are extremely encouraging. Now, of course, I'm biased because I'm part of that group, but I'm trying to wear my academic hat, looking at the data objectively. And there's great promise there.
And objective tools to really assess through
accommodation, exactly.
Yep.
I think the design you're talking about probably is the adapter lens, which is a lens that is shaped to be somewhat similar to the natural crystalline lens. I mean, it does make a lot of sense because just doing exactly what you're saying, trying to just put back what was there before. And obviously the difficulty becomes the surgical element where you've got to actually get the thing into the eye.
I just want to add, I think the future is really bright for refractive surgery. You know, premium implants, advanced implants, one of the best things that ever happened to them was LASIK, because we have to optimize that refractive endpoint. And I think this shift towards the sweet spot of LASIK happening with increased use of phakic IOLs, and I'd love to see phakic IOLs grow even faster, amazing results, and amazing results in these pseudophakic implants. So thank you, industry. I see robust future for corneal, phakic IOL, and lens replacement refractive surgery. And I want to thank you, Susana, for working together on this panel and this amazing panel that we got to work with. And now there's a big, beautiful lunch for you all to enjoy.
Thank you.
Yeah.